Welcome to class. Today we are going to talk about language endangerment. So, how language gets endangered, how language becomes extinct, what are the factors, what happens when language becomes extinct. So far, we have been talking about language as a beautiful social phenomena, right? Uh, and we have been talking about importance and centrality of language in organizing societies and communities. But imagine, what if some of the languages that we speak today may no longer exist in coming years? What will happen if we lose a few of them? This is a very grim situation. This is a very sad idea to see that some of the languages are in the process of being extinct. And very soon, hundreds of them will no longer exist. That means we won't have any speaker of those languages. We know nobody speaks Latin as mother tongue. Uh, Almost the similar situation about classical Sanskrit, in which we have our texts and holy books. Though the Census of India 2011 registers some of the speakers and respondents, approximately 45,000 and so, who have claimed to Sanskrit to be their mother tongue. But still, some of the classical languages are only restricted to holy textbooks, be it classical Arabic, Latin, Greek, Sanskrit, and so on. But what will happen when the languages that people speak till date, most of them vanish? And what do we lose once a language vanishes? So this is a little sad situation that we are going to discuss today. How language becomes extinct, language death. So how language gets endangered, and what can we do to vitalize them? What can we do to preserve them? What can we do to document them? And that is why there is a need to document them, preserve them, or in certain cases, vitalize them. So this is the theme of today's class. We are going to talk about endangered languages and language endangerment as a process. If you look at distribution of languages, uh, Ethnologue, which is a linguistic database, in its report in 2005, gives us a total number of 6,912 languages which are alive and spoken around the world. Huge number. But interestingly and also, surprisingly, only 97%, total 97% of the world's population speaks about only 4% of these languages. So only 4% of these languages. So out of 6,912 languages that Ethnologue reports in its database, 4% of it is spoken by 97% of the population of world. And about 96% of the total 6,912 languages, only 3% of the world population speaks it. So people who speak 96% of the total world languages are almost 3%. and 97% speak only 4%. So you can understand the distribution. So 4% of the total languages are spoken by 97% of the population of the world, and 96% of world languages are spoken by only 3% of the world population. That is the distribution of language. And a prediction says, Austin Peter and Salbank, they predict that by the end of 21st century, almost 100 years, in 100 years, uh, between 50% and 90% of the languages of the world will be extinct. So we won't have these languages anymore in coming 100 years. That is the situation today. Situation is grim as a linguist and also as a user of language. But if you look at the Indian scenario, again, it is a not different case. Look at the language distribution in Indian population, and I will take the Census of India language report, statement 2, and it says that in India, 96.71%, I repeat, 96.71% of total Indian population, according to Census 2011, speak scheduled languages. And by now you are familiar with scheduled languages, right? Scheduled languages are those languages which are included in Schedule 8 of the Constitution of India and have been given official languages status. So 96.71%, almost 97%, if you look at the ethnologue reports and distribution, it is almost like mirror image. So only 22 languages which are listed in 8th schedule, and 97 point, almost 97%, 96.71% of the Indian population of Indian people speak scheduled languages. That means all other varieties which are not listed in Schedule 8 are spoken by only 3.29%. Can you imagine? So non-scheduled languages and other languages, and majority of those languages are not even counted in the census data, because the rule and the framework census has for registering languages is that it must have more than 10,000 speakers. So there are languages where we have less than 10,000 speakers and they are not even registered. So we have not been counting them. And here 96.71% of the total Indian population speaks only scheduled languages which are in Schedule 8 of Constitution of India. And if you look at state-wise data, for example, in Jammu and Kashmir, it is 97.27%, Himachal 97.91, almost 98, in Punjab almost 100%, 99.86, in Chandigarh 99.81, let's say Uttarakhand 99.44, Haryana 99.94, and you can count, like Uttar Pradesh, for example, 99.98, Rajasthan 94.64, in Bihar 99.75, Sikkim 73.64, Arunachal Pradesh only 27.87. You remember this figure? We'll talk about it. Nagaland 11.87, Manipur 58.20, Mizoram only 12.35. Meghalaya, only 14.65, right? Otherwise, states like Assam, Bengal, Jharkhand, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, Daman and Diu, Dadar Nagar Haveli, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Goa, Lakshadweep, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Puducherry, we have more than 90% speakers of scheduled languages. So now the remarkable states are like, Arunachal Pradesh, for that matter, Nagaland, for that matter, Mizoram, Meghalaya, right? So these are the states uh, which have less than 20%, 30%, less than 30% speakers of scheduled languages. That means majority of the speakers in these states do not speak scheduled languages. So they speak non-scheduled languages. Otherwise, so you get more varieties in these states, right? And distribution of speakers. So if you look at the world distribution of languages, we saw that 97% of the total population speaks only 4% of the world languages, and 3% of the world languages are spoken by 3% of the world population speaks 96% of these languages. And the similar case we find in Indian distribution also in Census Report 2011, where scheduled languages are spoken by almost 96.71, almost 7 to 97%, almost mirroring the world number. Now, why I emphasize scheduled languages? Because the scheduled languages get institutional support, right? And these scheduled languages include 22 languages till date. So we have 22 languages like Assamese, Bengali, Bodo, Dogri, Gujari, Hindi, Kannada, Kashmiri, Konkani, Maithili, Malayalam, Manipuri, Marathi, Nepali, Odia, Punjabi, Sanskrit, Santhali, Sindhi, Tamil, Telugu and Urdu. These 22 languages are scheduled in the 8th schedule of Indian Constitution, and these 22 languages constitute almost 97% of the population's first language. So they speak these languages. So if you look at the returns in the census of India, these 22 languages cover 97% of the population. If I may ask, if you recall, we had talked about scheduled and non-scheduled languages. We had talked about Census of India data, and we saw that 1369 mother tongues, 121 languages. However, the return was very high, 19,569. If you look at the percentage of number of languages which are scheduled, it's not even 10%, less than 10%. And if you go by the mother tongue, rationalized mother tongue in 2011 census, 1369, out of 1369, what is the percentage of 22 languages? And these languages are spoken by 97% of the total population. And you can imagine why there is a movement, linguistic tension and movement for expanding this list, and more and more languages are demanding for inclusion in this 8th schedule to get institutional support and promotion. So now the question is, what is going to happen in coming future to those languages which have less than 10,000 speakers in India, to those languages which are spoken by only 3% of the total population of India, and the variety and the number of such languages is in hundreds. So handful of languages are spoken by 96.71%, and hundreds of languages are spoken by only merely 3.29%. That is a very grim situation. And what are these? Which are these languages which are fighting for inclusion in the 8th schedule? So far, there are 38 applications, right? Representations which are lying with the government of India for inclusion in 8th schedule. But many more languages are seeking inclusion and demanding their position. And these 38 languages, we have been talking about them time and again. I will quickly go through them. These 38 languages like Angika, Banjara, Bajika, Bhojpuri, Bhoti, Bhotia, Bundelkhandi, Chhattisgarhi, Dhatki, English, Garhwali, Gondi, Gujri, Ho, Kashashi, Kamatapuri, Karbi, Khasi, कोरावा और कुर्ग, कोकबरग, कुमाऊनी और पहाड़ी, खुरुक, कुरमाली, लेप्चा, लिम्बो, मिज़ो, मगही, मुंडारी, नागपुरी, निकोबारीज, हिमाचली, पाली, राजस्थानी, संबलपुरी और कोसाली, सौरसेनी और प्राकृत, सिराइकी, तेनीदी and Tulu. So these languages are demanding for inclusion and representations are pending for consideration. But again, I told you that to recall the percentage of scheduled languages spoken in states like Arunachal, it's states like Nagaland, states like Mizoram, northeastern states. So there we see a huge variety of languages. We are excluding Assam and Sikkim, right? Because scheduled languages are spoken there. Indo-Aryan Assamese is spoken in majority of cases. Bodo, of course, is the one which is another scheduled language. So, if you look at the linguistic profile of India, and if you look at number of languages spoken by the majority of population, it is very complicated. Only 22 scheduled languages, 97% of the population speaks that, and rest of the languages. I mean, if you look at the categorization in the census, again there are lots of debate on that. We can talk about it for hours and hours, because the way other languages have been included under one major language, like for example Hindi includes more than 40 languages under it as its dialect. Interestingly, we have been talking about the language and dialect. Now, interestingly, languages like Awadhi, Braj, Bhojpuri, Bundeli, Maithili now is a scheduled language, but other languages in eastern UP, Bihar, part of Madhya Pradesh, so they are included in Hindi. And if you look at the history of these languages, Hindi is relatively a new language, right? A recent phenomena compared to the long history of let's say Maithili or Bhojpuri or Awadhi or Braj. But interestingly, census includes them under Hindi. So there is a tacit linguistic tension and demand for recognition, inclusion and acceptance of these languages in Schedule 8. Now, coming back to how we started, why we started this discussion. We started this discussion to see the pattern of endangerment when a language moves on the path of being extinct slowly, slow death of a language and groups of languages. When we say death of a language, that means speakers stop speaking those anymore, acquiring those as their mother tongue. speaking them anymore, and the number of speakers diminish, and slowly language also dies. If you look at the world body, United Nations, UNESCO Constitution, Article 1 guarantees linguistic rights and human rights. I will quote from Article 1 UNESCO Constitution, and it says, UNESCO Constitution includes the maintenance and perpetuation of language diversity as a basic principle, to contribute to peace and security by promoting collaboration among nations through education, science, and culture, in order to further universal respect for justice, for the rule of law, and for human rights and fundamental freedom, which are affirmed for the peoples of the world without distinction of race, sex, language, religion, by the Charter of the United Nations. This is Article 1, UNESCO Constitution. It gives equal status and rights to all speakers, all languages of the world. Right? And based on this principle, UNESCO has developed programs aimed at promoting languages as instruments of education and culture, and as significant means through which to participate in national life. Now, for that matter, if you look at National Policy of Education 2020, this also emphasizes on mother tongue education at primary level. The challenges are bigger. We may not have resource books, textbooks, trained teachers, and learning material in many of the languages, right? But still, initiatives are there to promote mother tongue education at primary level, even in National Education Policy 2020, and which is a welcome step. UNESCO created a red book. That's called a red book. The report is called Red Book. And what is that? There was a committee and report was filed. The purpose of the Red Book of languages in danger of disappearing is to investigate, systematically gather information on endangered languages, to strengthen research and collection of material relating to endangered languages, to undertake activities aiming to establish a worldwide project and sustained commitment, and create a network of regional centers to promote these languages, to encourage publication of materials and the results of studies on endangered languages. And the 31st session of the UNESCO General Conference, held in October 2001, unanimously adopted Universal Declaration on Cultural Diversity, recognized a relationship between biodiversity, cultural diversity, and linguistic diversity. Right? Efforts are on to maintain the multilingual, diverse fabric of the world at United Nations level, and concerned governments are also making efforts to maintain the multilingual fabric. India has also done so. We'll come to that shortly. Now, the question is, when does a language become endangered? We'll go by the definition of ad hoc expert group report filed in 2003 of UNESCO, and it defines endangered languages as a language is in danger when its speakers cease to use it. Number one. Number two, use it in an increasingly reduced number of communicative domains. And number three, cease to pass it on from one generation to the next. That is, there are no new speakers, adults or children. So what it underlines three factors. Three factors, you know, uh, identify a language as endangered. Number one, when the number of speakers diminish, right? Or the speakers or the community stops using this language. Why it does so will come in a while. This is number one. Number two, when the domain of use shrinks, right? And finally, when the young children stop acquiring it, or when the adult population stops transferring it to the new generation. So basically, internal forces, the community itself is responsible when, but we cannot rule out the influence of external forces which force a community to abandon the language. So it is a complex phenomena. It is not a linear cause and effect thing, because why one community stops using its mother tongue, its language, and shift to other tongue? What are the conditions, circumstances under which it goes, right? There are multiple external forces and also internal forces which force language to be in danger and finally be extinct. So language becomes endangered only when the speakers of the language stop using it anymore, or the number gets decreased very fast, when the domain of influence and the domain of use shrinks, and finally when the elders of the community stop transferring it and the young children stop acquiring it as mother tongue, the language becomes endangered. And there are hundreds of such languages in India. UNESCO lists 191 languages. However, Government of India's figure is little lower, but more than 100. Moving on, what are the causes? Why it happens? So there are multiple reasons, like external forces like military suppression, attack, war, and we have seen displacement of population, immigration, movement, shifting, and it takes toll on their language, their practiced culture, and their entire social network. Economic reasons, people have to move out of their domain to go and search for job, and then they need to get assimilated in the new place with the new society, and slowly, right, they shift to majority language, dominant language for their survival. Mass conversions also for religious reasons, cultural reasons, and educational subjugation, where the child does not find the mother tongue relevant in education. So it develops apathy towards it, indifference towards it. So these are the external forces. But the role of community to maintain its language and culture is very crucial, and the role community becomes internal force to sustain, survive, and maintain its language and culture. So when communities develops negative attitude out of multiple factors, out of multiple external factors, for example, they may not see their language to be relevant in their social upward mobility. They may see their language not relevant in getting jobs and opportunities. They may feel their language is isolating them and they're not able to mix and mingle with the mainstream. So there are multiple reasons why community develops a negative attitude towards the language, and it slowly stops using it. The domain shrinks, the domain of use shrinks, and young children stop acquiring it as mother tongue, right? And this marks a language as endangered, because very soon this language will have no speakers and it will be extinct. However, internal pressure often have their source in external ones, and both stop the intergenerational transmission of linguistic and cultural traditions. And you can see in metro cities, right? We have a metrosexual culture. In metro culture, uh, you know, in pockets we have distinct languages and culture practices, but slowly the young generation, next generation, and a generation after generation, these languages vanish. Language maintenance and language shift is another phenomena we should understand. So few communities are able to sustain and maintain their language and culture to some extent, but majority of these migrant populated people, migrants, and who have settled away from their own motherland or native place, are losing out on these languages and their age old practiced culture. Now, why are we talking about preserving a language? Why there is a need to preserve a language? Why do we want to maintain a language? Why we are lamenting the loss of language? We have been talking about instrumentality of language in organizing communities, instrumentality of language in encoding their cultural history, instrumentality of language in encoding their age old deduced wisdom, right? Cultural practices, common narratives, collective history. So, a language is, a, a trajectory of their socio-cultural sustenance, and how they have sustained years and centuries. What are the deduced knowledge they have acquired? So language encodes all that. Language becomes carrier, and when it is lost, we lose a culture, we lose a entire social network, we lose our identity. As a speaker, I lose my identity, right? So it's almost like getting uprooted from your own history, from your own culture, from your own society. So if you look at the statement given by UNESCO ad hoc expert group on endangered languages, I will quote from there. It observes, I will quote, the extinction of each language results in the irrecoverable loss of unique culture, historical and ecological knowledge. Each language is a unique expression of human experience of the world. Thus, the knowledge of any single language may be the key to answering fundamental questions of future. Every time a language dies, we have less evidence for understanding patterns in the structure and function of human language, human prehistory, and the maintenance of world's diverse ecosystem. Above all, speakers of these languages may experience loss of their language as a loss of their original ethnic and cultural identity. That is the sad state of affair. Nature is diverse. The nature has diversity. Diversity is a natural process. Heterogeneity is common and natural, unmarked. So when we look at world's population, when we look at the world history, can you imagine, let's say, all the texts of a particular language, let's say Greek, are lost. What will happen to us? That all the textbooks and knowledge we have gained through our textbooks, holy textbooks, and all important cultural documents, they are lost. What will happen? We lose our identity, right? So it doesn't matter how many speakers a language has. It doesn't matter how big is the speech community of a language. Each language has its own root. Language is an organic system. Each of these languages have has their own ecological system. So once language is lost, everything is lost. The world is lost for these people who speak these languages. So what is the way forward? What do we do? Peter Ledfox argues that language death is a natural part of process of human cultural development, and that language dies because communities stop speaking them for their own reasons. Okay, let us take it as a natural normal process. We are born, we grow, and we get old and we die. But the concern is that the rate at which we are losing these languages. So thousands of years these languages have survived, and now we are losing them in hardly 100 years. So the speed is concerned. And as a speaker of these languages, or as a linguist, or as an individual who has concern towards such laws, we need to document them. We need to preserve them. We may not have fluent speakers of these languages, let's say, in 100 years. But if we have a systematic documentation of these languages in terms of grammar, in terms of encyclopedia, in terms of thesaurus, in terms of folk tales, folklores, oral literature may be recorded, and for coming generations, they'll be aware that there was a time when such a rich trajectory of language existed, right? So we need to document them, preserve them, and in certain cases, some rays of hopes are also there, where some of the African countries have been able to maintain, revitalize their native language. And India and Indian government is also doing a bit for it. So Government of India has taken note of this grim situation, and we say lesser known languages, that means languages which have very few speakers and majority of us even do not know about them. Government of India has listed such 117 languages which are on the verge of extinction because of low number of speakers. And in 2013, Ministry of Education instituted a project to record and preserve these languages, to document these languages, that is known as Scheme for Protection and Preserving Endangered Languages, SPPEL, right? The Scheme for Protection and Preservation of Endangered Languages, SPEL. This initiative by Government of India has listed 117 languages to be documented and preserved, and we'll see whether how many of them can be revitalized. For more detail on this initiative, you can log into www.sppel.org. It's a Government of India initiative which has listed 117 languages, and the distribution of these languages are given in the map you can see on the right. So, every capital in the world, all governments of the world, on the initiatives by UNESCO, are looking into the matter in documenting, recording, and preserving, and in certain cases, revitalizing these languages. But the fact is that majority of them we are going to lose in 100 years. No idea what will happen after 100 years when we are left with very few languages and majority of the population will be speaking that. But the natural order is diversity, and as an individual we all must make efforts to preserve our mother tongue. UNESCO has also declared 21st February as Mother Language International Mother Language Day to celebrate, derive pride, and promote our mother tongue. Because language is vigorous marker of our identity and it constitutes us, defines us who we are. So with these notes, we end up our discussion here. We'll continue with more important topics in our next class. Thank you for now. Thank you very much.